10 years? And how can we ensure that those that you identify can be shared equally? So we're going to have a bit of a mic game tonight.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think from an opportunity perspective, first things first is that we need to look at it from the perspective of what are our national priorities. We're looking at economic progression, we're looking at social interventions and all of that. So talking about things like you spoke about artificial intelligence, those are key opportunities, but the first thing is, what are the benefits that's going to come from it, right? What are the opportunities within the country? And really we're talking about how we can spearhead knowledge management, for example. That's within the really bringing about human capital, increasing the skills in the country. Another opportunity we're looking at is, for example, e-learning. And it might seem very simple or anything, it's not breakthrough or anything, but those are the opportunities that we have facing us right now. In the e-learning space, we're talking about digital skills. We're talking about exposing our students to e-curriculums. We're talking about reinforcing our curriculum with actual 4IR related technologies and interventions. So those are some of the opportunities out there. And those actually stand to bring about a lot of breakthrough in terms of how we teach our students, but also in terms of the actual human capital skills within the country. Another very important one, and there are a lot, but e-government. I think e-government is very important because now we're talking about improved service delivery. How do we bring about interoperability? How do we bring about shared ecosystems, data collaboration? We live in an age where there's a proliferation of data all across multiple devices. There's a lot of knowledge being created. So how do we bring about all of these different silos together and start having an interconnected, integrated ecosystem? So e-government in the provision of proper services to the country, in the provision of proper partnerships as well. From a perspective of data collaboration, I mean, if we're coming up with products, we're coming up with services, we're coming up with policy, we're highly reliant on things like data. So how do we take data that is spread across various silos in different organizations and start to use that for meaningful insights and all of that? So from a data science point of view, artificial intelligence point of view, how do we utilize these technologies? And those are things that are at the moment quite rife for exploration. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the element of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, there's a lot of opportunity in there. And at the moment, not just from the perspective of how do we protect our data, but how do we actually start creating services that are beneficial to our citizens, for example, identity services. And when we talk about things like cybersecurity, how do we create digital identities for our people where we're able to actually protect our identity, we're able to provide access to digital services. Those are the opportunities that are currently out there right now. So within 5 to 10 years, in fact, not even 10, this is 5 years, it's happening right now. Those are the opportunities that are currently there. And from an MTC perspective, those are things that we're also heavily busy with as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Noah. I think what resonated with me was what you mentioned, aligning it with national priorities and looking first at what are the outcomes you want and then looking at what technology can get you there. Now, speaking about innovative tech, and specifically innovative companies, I want to switch over to Luimar Silva. So your company, Jabu, your customers are low-income small retailers, predominantly, spaza shops, informal businesses. So in supply chain lingo, you're servicing the last mile. Can you briefly just explain what Jabu does and how technology is enabling you to operate a viable for-profit venture in such a difficult operating environment?
Thank you, and I just wanted to greet the room once again. I think it's such a great question. Usually when we speak about, okay, we are a tech startup, or we are a tech startup because we have an e-commerce, it could be, but what does Jabu really does and what does it mean when we talk about digitalizing or everything that we're doing towards the traditional retailers or business that we have? I'll just give a brief example to say that today in many places in, let's say, Southern Africa, which is our market, easily you find restaurants, bars, mini markets and so on in the most remote areas of the city, so the informal areas as they are known. And they spend crazy amounts of time every day going through different retailers or wholesalers trying to see who has the best deal so that they can purchase their products. When they finally find one or two places with prices that make sense, they have to then spend a lot of money in terms of transportation to get those products to their store. In the meantime, we have to understand that they don't have a lot of headcount, so there's not a lot of people involved in those businesses. And most of the times it's the owners themselves driving to those places or taking taxis to those places. So they spend a lot of time, and when they come back to their shops, most of the time they also spend about the same amount of hours at some point in banking queues trying to digitalize that money so that they can use for other purposes. So that's where we actually come in hand, and what we try to do is to make sure that we facilitate and we make a link between the biggest manufacturers and distributors in the continent to this big network of businesses that we have that are somehow more disconnected from the formal supply chain. So there was no evidence supply chain to help them and to give an overview of how it looks like in practice. So today a customer can place an order with Jabu, and there are diverse ways that they can do that. Number one, they can use the e-commerce website. They can use a Jabu app. They can call an entire account management team that can also take their orders for those that are not necessarily aware of, perhaps they can use an app. And in the case that you also don't have a phone, or for example, you don't have the app, we have a huge network of field agents that are also all over those same areas that you can place an order with. So this is all to make sure that we, most importantly, give the opportunity equally to everyone. So from the moment that the order touches in our system, we have also the Jabu Drivers Program, which is a huge network once again, and I think this term will be repeated consecutively. We have a lot of logistics companies that are now plugging into our ecosystem, especially because we emerged during COVID, and a lot of those companies were either going bankrupt or they couldn't really know how to generate revenue. So we started registering, and today we have a huge group of registered partners in the Jabu Drivers Program that take those orders that came into the system and deliver to those shops. In the process, we also collect the money which comes back to all our distribution centers and different partners to digitalize. So this is the entire process that we currently play. We mentioned about the aspect of how do you make sure, and this is related to the title, that instead of creating an opportunity to the society or to the service that we have, we don't actually become a blockage or a challenge. So number one of the areas that we strongly believe is that, and I think it will come in hand at some point in the conversation, you cannot really improve what you don't measure. And we are going to talk about data a lot, especially as we talk about digital transformation. And the biggest importance of data at some point is to make some kind of improvement to generate income, either in forms of reducing expenses or to generate more revenue. From a perspective of technology, we didn't fall into technology from the beginning. It was like a lot of manual work. So now you can imagine, for example, you have stock in a truck, you drive to different shops, you deliver, you receive some money, you come back to the office at the end of the day. How do you reconcile all of that? At some point, from a perspective of, if you are, for example, the person doing the deliveries, how do I even find those stores? How do I find those stores in the first place? You're just telling me that I'm going to Josephat's shop or Nawa's shop, but how do I find those stores if I'm the driver? I'm talking from the perspective of the driver. If someone working in sales, how do I manage those relationships if everything is on a paper or on a phone or something like that? You need tools for that. And if someone is in finance, we don't even talk about that. Because how do you reconcile like a lot of money because customers place an order for $1,000, you arrive there, they didn't make enough money for the day, so they only give you 100. So the first invoice and the last invoice don't really match. So because of all of this, we had to tap into the technology to be able to, number one, streamline all these processes. Number two, which is also equally important, scale. Because if you find a huge opportunity, you find a huge gap in the market that you're trying to serve, and you see that your proposition somehow has a value to the people in that community, how do you move from Vindu to Shakati and Dango, Office Space, Sokobun, Rundu? You cannot go with the same notepads and text invoices and write to everyone. So the technology was a very important matter in our ecosystem to be able to scale. And later on, it was also important to be able to measure and improve. How do you actually improve the lives of everyone in the communities? How do you improve like the unit economics of the shops that we work with. And then on the other hand, and lastly, is how do we become a huge network? How do we become, and what we are working towards now, like a super app that is not only for these informal retailers to purchase stock, but they can do all kinds of things that are some already live and some on the way, but it's quite interesting what we are exploring and tapping into.
In data is the new gold. And I think, it's really interesting how Jabu is using technology to solve specific, fit-for-purpose problems. It's not just throwing tech at the problem. And I think that's a really good best practice. I want to go over to Anisha. So you served as the chairperson of President Geinkorp's 4IR task force. And we've spoken about data now. And one of the things I found really interesting from your findings is the challenge of imperfect and unreliable data to help inform your report. I was wondering if you could tell us what is this data that you're referring to? Why was it such a challenge? And if there's any other key findings from your report that you'd like to share with us.
Thank you. Did ChatGPT look at the report and tell you to ask that? And by the way, the first time that I asked it to assist me with something, I said, "Oi, you're plagiarizing. Where are all of your references?" And it spewed out all of these references, but be careful, because we warn authors who publish to always, they have to sign now and tick that they take responsibility for whatever is being published, and if there are no referencing or references are omitted, they're solely responsible. But they're welcome to use ChatGPT, because it is going to change how we do things. And I could go on and on and on about the data, because it doesn't have any data about us. There's a lot of missing data. But coming to that, the notion of incomplete and unreliable data is basically a soft term or a diplomatic term for what I think that I had termed much harsher of what we lack. And within the country, there's very little digital data in a format that we have that we can actually use. Anybody trying to look up things, statistics and things about Namibia, I'm not talking about the census data, etc. There's just, we generate very little digital data that could be used. So that's the one problem, the data itself. The second part of it is sometimes that data is inaccurate and it's unreliable. There are complete data sets that we need for important economic decisions that we are taking, and we simply don't have it. There's data missing that we can input into our modeling tools, for predictions and looking at trends and solving certain problems, prediction analysis. We simply don't have that. And data has, so across its 6 dimensions of quality, we're lacking in every respect of that. The other problem is that data exists somewhere, right, on platforms, etc. And that for us is also a huge challenge. You were referring to, for instance, that we have, there's like data standards, and yes, Office of the Prime Minister has been working on it for a long time. So there's just a lot missing in that aspect to manage our data as well. Also, where our data resides is another challenge, because we know that a lot of our data, and that is crucial, government data, resides elsewhere. They don't reside in country. So that's one thing that we also tackled in there. And then the other thing together with data is also that you need to have specialized skills within the country. You need data engineers, you need data scientists, you need developers, you need data analysts. There are so many of those type of specialists that we need, and yet we do not really train for them. NAS and UNAM have started master's degrees in data science. Who trains the data engineers? Do we even have a data engineer under our engineering profession? We don't. So there's a lot that's missing in that, which will take me to education, because I think skills is one of the big components that is identified, and I'm not talking about basic curriculum reform or whatever. I'm talking about really having a skilled workforce for the future that we're heading into and that we need to be competitive in. So that's one topic that I can talk about for long. But anyway, so coming from that is then essentially that we had recommended a national green data center. And I know that we had comebacks on that. Yeah, but Paratus already has a data center. What do you mean? No, we actually mean that government needs to take control over government data. And we need to have a legislative and regulatory framework around the data in this country. But if we have accurate and complete data, then we can regulate it. And regulate also means put in regulations. Not only people tend to think just data protection, etc., but also to facilitate open data. Because citizens should be able to do something with the data. Researchers should be able to work with that data. So that's the type of data and availability that we were referring to in the report. So do you want me to go on?
I think that's very interesting. And I mean, these are debates and issues that are quite technical, so we don't always hear about them in the news. So I think it's a really interesting gap that you've identified. So thank you for that. And you talked about the importance of skills and literacy and having a skilled workforce, and I think that's a great time to hand over to Josephat. So you're the director of MILI, the Media Literacy Learning Initiative Trust. So can you just tell us a bit more about your organization? What exactly, on a more general note, is media and digital literacy? And why is this important from a social and economic perspective?
Thank you for the question. So I'm the director now for the Media and Information Literacy Learning Initiative. And so as the organization itself says, is that we really try to capacitate and educate young people. So our focus is specifically on young people, on media and information literacy. So yes, we do understand that young people are exposed to all the information. We have our smartphones, we have access to internet, we have access to computers. But then how do we critically analyze the information that we access on these different platforms? And I think that is very much important because, when we are trying to really educate and raise awareness on some of these things, so at times people don't really see the importance of it. They don't see the value of it because everybody feels like, I am a content creator, I have an access to a Twitter account, I have an access to an Instagram account, I can create this video and all of these. But then the questions around that lies actually also on some of the things that I think also Prof spoke about in terms of this information of myself that I'm sharing here. So what consequences do they have, in terms of them being in the public domain? Because we say that once your information is online, then it's online. People can screenshot whatever content that you're creating and they can share it all over. So what we really try to do as MILI is that we educate and capacitate young people on media and information literacy. And at times we get, there's always a question around, what is media literacy? So what we really try to justify and answer on that is that media literacy is really the skills and the knowledge and for you as a human being to be able to critically analyze the information that you expose yourself to. And for this, we use, what we call our 5 dimension, which is Accra, and this is not the capital city of Ghana, but it's actually, to access, to analyze, to create, to reflect, and to act on the information that you receive. So So what do we do around this? So first of all, analyze the information that you expose yourself to. You know, does it really speaks on any relevant stuff? Does it really has any bias in it? Does it speak on key crucial topics around that? So you are really analyzing this information that you're exposing yourself to. And then from there you start to really create your own reflections on this information that you expose yourself to. Whether you share it, whether you reply to a text, whether you write your own article and so forth. And then from there, before you really write and share this article, we say that now you need to really reflect on this information also that you're about to share. You know, this information that I'm about to share in the public domain, where it's not gonna be, you know, deleted and where anybody can have access to it. Does it really portray the information, and does it really portray the message, you know, that I think is just, is biased, and, you know, does not really has any consequences on anything? And then from there you act. So I think for us, you know, what we believe is the socio-economic element around this is that, you know, it really creates the skills and the knowledge for the young people to be able to know the information and to really analyze the information that they're sharing. And then also, really what we try to do is that once they learn the whole element of media and information literacy, we train them on creating content online. And then with that, we really capacitate them and educate them on the importance of creating content online that are verified, going through all the whole media ethics elements around that, and hopefully, you know, be able to get monetized and start creating the sustainability for yourself around that. We have a whole high youth unemployment rate, as we are aware as a country, and really with media and information literacy, we really try to see that, you know, how can we try and create sustainability for our young people, but at the same time also really making sure that they understand and they know the importance of media and information literacy, for them to be equipped, because we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, we are talking about the digital world. So the world is moving into the digital era, but how prepared are we for this digital era in terms of media and information literacy? What do we understand about, you know, the ChatGPT? What do you understand about the fourth industrial revolution? What does it really mean? What do you understand about artificial intelligence? You know, as young people, how beneficial is it for us? You know, we see everything around the internet, but then how prepared are we about this? How well do we know about this? Even the WhatsApp, you know, message that we get, we hear that, you know, it's a two factors, you need to have like a verification or authentication methods. You know, what do we understand about this? You know, what kind of authentication methods that we need to put in place for this? So really the media and information literacy, I believe that it's an important component for us as young people to be able to learn, in order to prepare us also into the world that we're moving, because technology keeps evolving, but how literate are we with this technology that is evolving?
So important, you know, to engage critically as opposed to just consume. And I think during COVID and all the disinformation, we really saw the need for that. I think taking a step back, we've talked about how do we engage with online media, but another issue we face in Namibia is just getting people online. So I'm taking this statistic with a pinch of salt, knowing that data is unreliable, that publicly available. But apparently, according to one source, there's only 41% of Namibians that are connected to the internet, which is, any of us that were in school, if you only got 40%, that's a bad fail. There's also significant, 51, There's significant disparities in access as well between urban and rural communities. So I want to give this question over to Nawa. MTC is the largest mobile service operator in Namibia. What are some of the challenges for mobile infrastructure in and around the country? Why is it so difficult to get access to the most remote communities? And related to that, can you just tell us a bit more about MTC's 081 Everyone project and how that's trying to bridge this urban-rural connectivity divide?
All right, thanks, Neil. So with, you know, digital inclusion it's a shared journey. With the 081 Everyone project, it was our main intervention towards bringing connectivity to every corner within the country. Now, if you look at the challenges in that space, let me just paint a story or paint a picture. So you have MTC coming to a community, and the first thing is there's no electricity. To put up infrastructure, you need electricity. You need road access as well. So throughout these projects that we've been doing, we've actually seen ourselves as becoming a utility company, pulling electricity to communities. And it's quite interesting that through bringing about mobile connectivity infrastructure, we've actually powered up communities. We've actually brought roads to communities. So to speak about the challenges there, and that's why I say digital inclusion is a shared journey. We require all hands on deck, not just from telecommunications companies, but from utility providers as well. So electricity, and those are really the basics. Electricity, road infrastructure, those are really the basics that we need to get right in order to start getting proper connectivity to every corner within Namibia. Another one also, I'm not too sure, I assume that everyone here has a smartphone. Do you know that your smartphone is a luxury? It's a luxury. And when we speak about bringing about connectivity, the first thing is, do the users actually have smartphones? Can they afford these smartphones? So we found ourselves coming up with a dual data strategy as well, where we started deciding that we need to move people from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, for example. And this obviously is an intervention to start connecting more people so that people can start benefiting from mobile data services, internet connectivity. The main challenge is that you have grandpa, grandma, the whole family with those, they call them tamagotchis. You can't do any internet on that. So our response to that was subsidizing smartphones. We had the Smartphone campaign as well, which was also critical to the 08 Everyone project. We started subsidizing 50 to 60% of the device costs. Now users can actually get a smartphone for the price of a feature phone, for example. One thing I'd like to highlight though is bringing these devices in. You look at tax implications as well. You have to pay luxury tax. They call it ad valorem taxation on it. So it's a luxury good. Why I say digital inclusion is a shared journey or shared responsibility, from a taxation point of view as well, we also have to come up with tax incentives to sort of make sure that if we're talking about bringing about digital inclusion, we need to also look at the devices that we actually put in the hands of our people. How does that move from becoming a luxury good to a standard, mandatory human right, for example? So those are the key challenges that we face within really bringing about connectivity. But I must say it's an interesting journey. MTC is not only a connectivity provider, but we're bringing electricity and everything. Yeah.
Thank you, Noah. And I think what you mentioned there about the devices is also critical. The Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is a think tank, said that for meaningful connectivity, you don't just need a broadband connection, but you need a device where you can engage properly, and you need the skills to actually engage. So very, very relevant. I want to shift perspectives and talk a bit about, ask a few questions specifically on the topic of youth. So I'm going to throw out some more unreliable stats over here, but I think these are a bit better. People under 24 years old make up 56% of Namibia's population, which is, on the one hand, these are all Gen Zs. They're all digital natives that ostensibly know how to use smartphones or have the capacity to engage with them. Africa is just the youngest continent, and I think that could reap amazing benefits if utilized over our lifetime. But then we should also consider that youth unemployment sits at 44% in Namibia. So I want to ask Luimar and Josephat, you've both been very active in youth advocacy and volunteering in your personal capacities. So I just want to ask, can you just share some of your experiences both as young Namibians, but also leaders in your community, about the challenges that young people face in Namibia?
Thank you. That's quite interesting questions. Yes, actually, Josephat and I are colleagues for about 2 years at the Namibian chapter, the Ubuntu chapter for the World Economic Forum, so the Global Shapers. And one of the most exciting projects that I think we have been working on with the support of the institutions like the United Nations is the Shape Skills project. So we are talking specifically about youth and employment, but a lot of the times what our youth really needs is not only the opportunity, but to be skilled enough for the opportunity. And I think this is something that during the fourth IR conference, I also heard from Prof. Anisha quite a few times, this importance of mentioning on the curriculum and the skills that are required also to join the workforce. And I can give you an example not only from a perspective of the Shape Skills project, which we have been running now for two years, I believe, but even from our own perspective as a company. If you go today on the website, you'll find some of the vacancies that are maybe 6 months there. And it's not that the HR team is not interviewing, but the HR team is really tough to find the ideal candidate. So it's not enough to push on the job creation side. I think it's just like a portion of the issue. But equally, we also have to really think strongly about the skill sets that are required. So the Shape Skill is where we try to equip recent graduates, because we 100% agree and believe that having a university degree or finalizing university in any field doesn't make you necessarily qualified enough to join the workforce. So we try to work with a lot of young people, and at the end of the program they also get like a kind of a certificate, and they learn a lot of basic skills that usually they wouldn't learn elsewhere. Even to prepare a CV, you'll be surprised, they're quite bright people, but they can't prepare a CV that is interesting enough. Imagine how many CVs companies are going through, and now I think very soon AI will be going through these CVs themselves. And if you have nothing that you can stand out, you don't even get to the interview stage. So it's okay to push for job creation, but I think equally we should push for really like skills. And sometimes it's being able to speak in front of people. We have sessions on public speaking and project management and things like that. And people, like, it looks like they're coming out of like primary school, sometimes by the level or the lack of information or skills on those areas that are super important. You can be a very great, I don't know if you for example, you did education and you are maybe very skilled in terms of the content and be able to prepare the content, but you can't deliver. So I think those are some of the aspects that we see a lot of gaps. And the youth is also very open to it. That's amazing. So I think all of us have been benefiting from learning from one another and learning from them. But the digital part of the things becomes critically important, I think, especially for the employment stage.
Very true what Luma actually alluded to, and I think skills is one of the most important things. But I think also, one of the challenges that young people face is actually, I'm not sure if I should really put it as a lack to access to credible information for them to really be able to really tap into the industry. For me, I should say that I'm very much fortunate in that I was really exposed to some of the opportunities during my voluntary work, especially through the Internet Society of Namibia chapter, and that is where I really got exposed to different opportunities that pushed me to be able to partake in international conferences and also into regional conferences, because I think that through those international conferences, that's where I managed to get the skills, that's where I managed to get the exposure, that's where I managed to get the connections to the people that can be able to really help me and grow me and uplift me. So I think, accessibility is one of the things. Yes, we do as young people have access to, the devices, we have access to data and all of these things. But then how do we use this, the data that we expose ourselves to? How do we use, how do we search the information? Do we search information just to showcase the work that we do and also promote ourselves on social media, or do we really try to search for opportunities that are there as young people also? So I think also some way, somehow, it's a mind shift kind of a thing where you really need to try and see, with the opportunity, with the luxury that, you kind of spoke about, the mobile device, how do I use it for the benefit of myself, to be able to really uplift myself and also to be able to access the information that I face. I wouldn't say that that as young people, the opportunities are there. It's just really a matter of us trying to see how we can penetrate on that, and of course trying to really make use of the skills, as Lumaya has alluded to, that are also available there for us to really uplift ourselves.
Yeah, very insightful, both of you, thanks. And I think, yeah, just upskilling and reskilling is such an important thing. And it makes me think, Anisha, I think when we spoke earlier, you mentioned the big problems of sort of the public learning institutions with just basic education as well as these advanced education. Do you see any role for private institutions on, can I call it, extra national curricular learning opportunities that can sort of plug this gap, or at least help in some sense?
You referred to the report earlier, and the report really had a very, very extensive big section on education reform. And I know that, there are some people go like this, oh, this is our baby, don't touch it, etc. But we need to talk about it, because we are not going to move forward as a country. Doesn't matter what we have if we do not have that skilled workforce. And some of you in this room know the gaps that exist within our education and skilling system. Now, one of the things is, for instance, a person coming out of school, right? What are their opportunities? Where do they go to? Some of them go to university, but not everybody is meant for university. So some of them go to these to the TVETs, but the TVETs are training only artisan level, right? So they don't even go to the technician level. So where do you get the technician level? So this is now where you have like a plethora of private training institutions sort of coming in and trying to fill that gap. But many of them also rely on, just like the universities, on sort of, you have to attain a certain standard to go there, etc. So in a sense, they're kind of like competing for the same sort of strata of learners coming out of the school system. But one of the things that is there is really within our system, we don't have the apprenticeship layer, right? So those who don't really need to undergo that formal education, we need to have what you were saying just now. Not everybody needs to have a degree to go, especially in the tech world today, right? So you find brilliant people who've had probably just 6 months of training, right? Intensive bootcamp training. And by the way, this is actually what is happening now within East and West Africa. And that is that there are, for instance, Google is one of them, who is sort of setting up scholarship programs and bootcamp programs to intensively train for development skills, for AI skills, etc. And that takes about 6 months to 9 months. It doesn't even take a full year. And what you have is you have then that critical mass of developers coming out and, and sort of assisting the economy. So if you're coming out of school and you don't want to go either of those paths, maybe you just want to be an entrepreneur and you're looking for some courses to upgrade yourself, or maybe you want to go into AI, where do you go to? So those are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Some countries within Africa are setting up, for instance, coding academies. It's very different from what you're finding in your formal university system or at a private training college, etc. And in the 4IR report, we've actually also recommended the setting up of a national AI institute, and that one will do some form of training, right, but not your formal degrees. And then, of course, the R&D and development of responsible and ethical AI, not like ChatGPT. It's very unethical for me that it plagiarizes. And recently, what's happening on Bing, getting unhinged and getting emotional and calling the users demons and devils and children of devils and so on. But and then tackling, precisely some of the issues that we had spoken about before. But one of the things under skills, it's not only that we're looking at the different types of skills, whether it's vocational, whether it's apprenticeships, whether, that's or stratum, but we're also looking at teaching methodologies. How do you train in the new era? How do you train in the new era of ChatGPT? How do you train these new, very highly specialized skills that are coming up? How do you train, for instance, lawyers at the moment? Namibia has this problem that we don't have specialized lawyers. We have a lot of lawyers, but the specialized lawyers, we're still relying on South Africa to bring in. Like, those are some of the things within education that needs to be addressed. Another thing is, it doesn't help for educators to be talking just amongst themselves, whether they're higher, whether they're primary, whatever level of educators they are, to talk amongst themselves and come up with curricula. They need to involve, for instance, the industry, because the industry have to absorb their outputs, right? And industry is not happy, but yet we are turning out the same people every year. They need to involve communities themselves, parents, etc. So I know that there's claims that is happening, but we don't see it in the big scale that we need to see it. So I think there's a lot that can be done on skilling, and there's definitely a lot of room for private educators.
Yeah, it shows that there's a lot of, now I've got a comment. Yeah, very good. Let's go for it.
Just before you move on to the next, to touch on that, I think some of the work that we've been doing as MTC, we partnered with NUST and through the HTTPS, which I'm certain that a lot of you are familiar with, we've created a talent alliance. And this is really bridging the gap between industry and academia. From a skills perspective, students go through 3 to 4 years of degree programs and all of that. When they land a job, the first question is, but you studied for 3 years, we need to train you for about 1 to 3 years to be proficient in the technologies we have in this company. And we realize that the gap is that we need insights from industry. So industry needs to start informing curriculum choices within academia, for example, and it's spot on what Prof was saying. So what we're doing is really bridging that gap, and funny enough, there's people in the vocational space. There are actual people who have not gone through a formal degree program that are actually running coding camps, that are actually running gamification camps. At the HTTPS, we have some young gentlemen running gamification for little kids. And we asked them, okay, so from which institution are you from? NUST? Are you from UNAM? He said, no, self-taught. And these are really the talent alliances we want to create. Another key intervention we did was with our partner, Who Are We? We're creating a short course to allow for any man on the street who's able to go through a short program and start actually working on large technology platforms without the need for a specific degree or anything. And the reason why is that you go to formal schooling for 3 to 4 years, but once you land, for example, a technical job, the system that you're going to be working on, whatever it is, they're going to send you for training in South Africa or England or the UK. Then you come back to Namibia with those skills, but that program is not accredited. So that shows that accreditation is not really, it doesn't put a stop to actually having a wider set of skills and coming up with programs, because ultimately what industry needs is skills, on-demand skills. Industry needs a talent pool, talent alliances, and actually just better if we're able to open up all these courses to the general public and start training our people. I think we'll be in a position where we start saying, the youth actually has opportunities, despite the opportunities that obviously academia provides. Yeah.
There's one other big problem in the country, for instance, and that is that we don't have the technician trainers level. That's number one. I know that TVETs are reviewing their curriculum to sort of cater for that level. But the other problem is within the engineering sort of profession, right? You have professional engineers needing the technician level and the technologist level. And simply within the country, we're not training for that anymore. So then how do you move that forward? Yet we have so many engineers on the street, right? Unemployed. They, like the lawyers and others, they would say that I'm graduating into unemployment. Now other countries are asking us, especially when we were looking at this, development of green hydrogen, they're asking us, they're saying, but we have a shortage of engineers. How can this be that Namibia has this large pool of unemployed engineers? So I think those are some of the things that we really need to fix and get a grip on it. Thank you.
Very true. And yeah, I think what it just shows me is that, there's a lot of room for creativity and the type of skilling that we can design that's more fit for purpose for the jobs that we need. I want to now pivot over to another sort of aspect of inequality, and specifically gender inequality. So currently there's no gender focus in any of the sort of ICT legislation that I've looked at in Namibia. Yet we see that women and girls are still predominantly affected by a lot of socio-economic issues in the country. But there are cases and best practices of other African countries adopting ICTs that can really improve the welfare and equality of females. So I want to first go to Josephat and ask him, with your background in the civil society sector as well, do you think that enough is being done to ensure gender equality in the digital sphere? And what changes do we need at the community level as well as the policy level for these protections?
Good question. I feel like, when it comes to technology, yes, of course, we have seen that, it's mainly male-dominated in a lot of sectors. And I think one of the things that we also try to do actually, especially through the Namibia Internet Governance Forum, is the fact of that, we try to bring in different key stakeholders together for a 1 day or 2 days forum to come and really talk about some of these issues and to really try to see how best can we be able to come up with a solution to address some of these issues. A second thing that we've also observed, or that I've also observed, is that, when people talk about technology or when they talk about the internet, there is a certain level of fear, they think that it's all this high tech, all this, computer and all of this. But I think, the literacy components around that in terms of really capacitating that, this is where the world is moving. This is why it's so important to you as young people or as anybody to move into this sector, especially as women. Then I think we can be able to move and try to really address some of these issues. But I think it's just really the capacity and the knowledge. That's one of the challenges in terms of really making them aware that technology is not as rocket science as people make it think like, and that there's really an importance. And people really need to be capacitated and informed about that. And then secondly is that, there needs to be really an engagement in terms of policy level. There needs to be an engagement in terms of industry, different key stakeholders to come together and really to address on this, from business sector, from civil society, from the government, to talk and engage on the importance of this and really try to make sure that there's an inclusivity aspect in this. And eventually, hopefully one day we'll get there.
It's very, very true. The multi-stakeholder engagement is such an important part. Anisha, I want to ask you a more nuanced question on this topic. So, you've done your PhD in human-computer interaction. You're an expert in it. So, I think firstly for me and maybe some audience members, can you just tell us what is human-computer interaction as a field of study? And have you found that gender inequality exists in the way that human-computer interaction is designed?
Okay, so human-computer interaction is essentially that we study the human. First of all, you study sight, you study how the brain works, you study touch, you study smell, everything. And then we basically design and develop technologies for the human, that is adapted to the human. Our field touch on everything. If you think of moving, some of you in the room might be too young to still remember the command line, but if you think of the Windows as you know it today, that is coming from the field of human-computer interaction, making it easier for humans to basically interact. All of the gesture systems, everything that you see on your smartphone, the touch, etc., all of that comes from the field of HCI, that's short. And then, of course, you also have user experience. So we focus not only on functionality, we also focus on the happiness of the user. How do you feel when you're interacting with that? And one of the big things for us is that we were also moving from robotics, so all of that interactions and learnings, and then also within the field of AI, so that's what we're working. And by the way, I'm the technical program chair for our premier conference in human-computer interaction, which is a premier conference of the Association of Computing Machinery. And in April, we will be showcasing and I'm trying to schedule all of this, for about 5,000 attendees I think we have about 30 rooms, that is over 6 days fully occupied from morning 6 o'clock until nighttime 6 o'clock, and scheduling over 100 sort of presentations and 100 interactivity demos on what is coming, but this is cutting edge, what is coming up, the latest in the field. You know, like sometimes you see a chip, people talk about a chip, or sometimes you use your hand, you know, completely for a screen or to throw something against the wall. So that's the type of things that HCI is doing, very cool things.
Very fascinating. And just to touch on the second point, and do you find that gender inequality can perpetuate through the way that HCI works? Okay,
so first of all, the field of HCI, just like the field of computing, you know, the world's first programmers were women, right? If you didn't know that, look at the ENIAC 6, those supercomputers of the olden times, all of the programmers were women. Ada Lovelace, the world's first programmer, was a woman. Grace Hopper is a woman who, you know, invented all of these programming languages, etc. So within HCI, the field is relatively equal, generally. But in computer science in general, you have about only 3% worldwide are women, right? So that's how little it is. But within my field, it's much better. Except that you don't find really people who specialize in my field across Africa. We know each other because we're very few. And then the second thing is that, so let me leave my field because we don't have a statistic in Namibia or in Africa to sort of compare it to. But if you look at computing in general, remember the statistics of 3%, according to UNESCO, 3% of women who are in that field, and engineering, which is sort of related, it's 11%, right? So now, coming from there, if you look at Namibia's statistics, we are doing much better than most of the countries in the world. Because when it comes to women in computing, and these are old figures, but I think in 2018 it was about 46% of women in that is in industry, right? And then you had, like, those figures are probably in the 30s for for women enrolled in computing programs. And as I said, compare that to the percentage that you find worldwide. So Namibia is faring quite well in that. Now, universities in general, at UNAM, the total population of students, female population is 67%. But I always say that you need to hone into the figures. There's big data, right? But then there's small data, and small data matters. You have to zero in and look at where are the women. And you'll find that within computer science, you'll find that the women do not exist, hardly exist, in software engineering. But then you also find that there are few men. Namibia doesn't turn out a lot of software engineers in general, whether they are male or female. But when I was a dean at NUST, for instance, you know, the most that we graduated in a year was 11. And then you might have like 2 or 3 women, or you would have 1 woman graduating. So those are the figures, and this is why at one stage we had to bring in software engineers from elsewhere, like from India, etc. Another example that I want to give, sorry, I know I'm not answering precisely on gender, but I'll get to it just now, is that recently we are working on 2, well, at least I was responsible for one big project, and there was another big sort of software development project in Namibia. One was an international funder, and you know, it's very embarrassing for me to say that on both these projects we had to bring in software developers from India, because we simply didn't find them in Namibia. And it's paining, and this is where I'm going with the skilling problem. It's really a problem. We need to build that critical mass of skills, you know, of highly specialized skills in this country. Anyway, so coming back to women, so those fields are not doing, you know, too badly with women, but I'm fearing that in Namibia we're kind of like going backwards as far as women are the gender balance is concerned, in especially many of these critical sort of STEM fields. Not in general. You find lots of women in medicine, you know, and etc. So there are many fields where women are outnumbering the men, and that's a bit worrying. But in green hydrogen, okay, who watches some of the pictures online and follows some things online on green hydrogen? Who? How many women do you see? How many? Exactly. So where are our role models? Where are our mentors? How are we going to train more women? Recently at UNAM, there were, I think, 8 scholarships or 6 scholarships awarded for PhD studies in green hydrogen. How many women? So we don't want to always go on quotas and things like that, but I do think that sometimes in some fields we need to consider quotas. And quotas is not only going the way of women, but some fields we also need to get in more men because it's too female dominated. So I really believe in a balance, because I believe in diversity of ideas. That was a bit of a lengthy answer.
It was a very, very interesting one. And yeah, like you mentioned, representation matters. And we're not going to get a diversity of views if it's only the same type of people in these positions. I want to talk about digital finance now. So I think digital financial services has been one of the biggest ways in which technology has increased economic growth, especially in Africa. So, countries like Kenya and East Africa, and Ghana and West Africa have really pioneered the use of mobile money as a means for people across the income spectrum to engage in transactions. Now, Namibia itself is breaking into this space, and in 2020 alone, mobile money transactions increased by 180%, and it's continuing to increase. So I first want to talk to Luimar. So J-Wallet, Jabu's J-Wallet, can you just tell me a bit more about how this digital wallet is trying to reach the unbanked community, and your plans for it in the future.
Thank you. I'll make sure that I don't spoil Linekela's work, because Linekela is our head of the J-Wallet, at least for Namibia. But as I mentioned, as we tap into the different, let's say for example, the informal sector, firstly you move, you go there to deliver stock, and then you understand that it's actually an entire ecosystem, and that money can circulate for 1 month and never touch the bank. But it went for buying food, taxi, cutting the hair, all kinds of activities, but it was just within that ecosystem. So it's a very strong economy that is little known in terms of the dynamics. And so today we are in Namibia, South Africa, we have some things going on also in Botswana and Zambia. When I'm having conversations, for example, with Tamale, a city manager from Lusaka, she doesn't really understand why is our finance team so stressed all the time about checking real time the numbers and how cash is being moved from one place to another? Because about 50% maybe, or like 40 to 50% of all her sales is digital money. So she doesn't understand how can it be that risky, or why is the need to speed up such thing? Because the way even the informal traders in Lusaka today are buying through Jabu is like almost 50% digital. So in one hand, it's better from a perspective of control, monitoring, just compliance. But today in Namibia, we are more on the stage of policing and licensing and things like that, so there's a lot going on in that regard. But our tech team is also busy, especially in the markets like Zambia that is a bit more evolved. But the whole vision for the wallet is how do we, so usually when we talk about our users, we refer to wallet share. So if someone has 1,000 Namibian dollars to spend on stock first, we already identified as an entire ecosystem. She will sell, let's say she buys stocks for 100 Namibian dollars, she will sell for 150. Jabu comes tomorrow, you give another 100 to buy stock. The 50 is actually going around to buy fat cook for the child to go to school, to pay for the taxi, then to pay something for the teacher. So we are like, how do we also tap into that? Like there's such a big opportunity in terms of like the digital way in which money is flowing. So that tomorrow we can not only have an informal shop, for example, buying products with Jabu through the wallet, but even the taxi that your daughter is jumping into, I can maybe just transfer the money to that person. So there's a lot of policy and the important paperwork and regulatory issues that need to be addressed and are currently being addressed. But our vision for the wallet is really in the sense of how do we tap into the ecosystem fully, so that we are a player at all the interactions that you have, and not only when you need to stock up your shop or something like that. And we have also very interesting ideas around empowering those shops to sell more than just stock, because I think we have seen ShopRite doing it quite well.
Go ahead. Now you're able to directly transfer this money to the communities that actually require it. One of the projects that we're currently working on right now is with the World Food Program. And if you're familiar with the food bank and all of these different interventions government had, where you have all of these different warehouses stocked with food, then a year later you hear, oh no, there's a couple million worth of food that has gotten rotten because the processes weren't in order and everything. So what we're doing as an entity, and really through the platform of my mobile financial services, is that we're allowing for underserved communities to actually start having access to e-tokens, e-vouchers. So now as a means of distribution, entities are able to start providing e-vouchers. You identify a specific community, we actually register them through a platform, digital platform. Before they used to drive to the regions and capture all these beneficiaries of forms and everything. But now you have a platform, digital platform, where you capture all of these guys' documentation and all of that. And then afterwards you're able to distribute e-tokens through which they are able to transact with the various stores. I'm sure Jabu might be one of the stores. But you know, you're not using physical money. And it brings about capabilities of analytics. You're able to start planning to say, okay, fine, which communities consume more of this product? At what times do they consume this product? What are the efficiencies we need to bring about? So really the conversation around mobile financial services is to bring about efficiencies, and we're very much busy in that space. We'll be launching very soon. I think I've done justice. I didn't reveal too much, we also want to excite you guys like Jabu's doing, and definitely there are synergies in terms of how we're going to roll out. Thank you.
Keeping us on the edge of our seats with your little teasers, huh? Okay, everyone, I think that brings us to the end of the first part of our panel discussion. And I think now we'd like to open the floor to all of you and see if there's any questions or comments from the floor, questions that you'd like to ask our panelists. I think we're trying to make this as engaging, as interactive as possible, so please don't be shy. So I'll take the first round of hands if there are any. Wonderful. Joe, we're going to use this mic? Do we have a different mic? Only the one. Okay, well,
it's not long enough.
Yeah, if it's not too much trouble, can I ask you to come to the front? Thank you. Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion, and my question is going to be mostly to Noah, but everyone else is more than welcome to answer. You mentioned in the very first answer e-governance, and I really want to know, maybe you know, like what Namibia is planning in this sphere, what are the expectations, how MTC is going to contribute to this, and whether you're planning to do any benchmark with advanced countries like Estonia or Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So if you're talking about e-government services, I think as a baseline, it's all about how do you bring about better service delivery. Now, I'll give you an example. Recently, someone went to Home Affairs to renew something, and they were asked, "Can we please have a copy of your ID?" The person looks, but I'm in Home Affairs. You guys are the ones who gave me this ID. E-government is all about how we're able to utilize platforms, systems, processes in a digital manner to bring about better service delivery. Now, what we as MTC have been doing, we have established proper cloud platforms, for example, and this is really the foundations upon which we expect as a country. Prof, you spoke about data sovereignty. We need to keep our data in country. So we're talking about how we store our data, how we access our data. So we're talking about data collaboration as well. You have entities like NSA, which does census. You have entities, the banks, you have the MTCs. And at any point in time, policy decisions need to be made. But how do we get access to data? And how do we sort of create synergies in terms of interconnecting all of these different agencies together on a digital platform, through data collaboration, through data sharing agreements, obviously then underpinned by relevant technologies such as your cloud technologies. That's the space we're playing in. And for government to be able to provide better services, we need to start leveraging the infrastructure that we have already within country. Another example is, for example, facilitating ease of doing business. I'm sure you've heard about NIBDB and the one-stop shop, allowing investors to come in, you register your company, not just investors, but the SMEs as well, our own local entrepreneurs. Now, to register a business, you have to visit so many different entities, and it takes you so long, but this is something that you can do within 1 hour or less through a digital platform. So how do we get all of these entities to interconnect, to start sharing processes and start sharing systems? So when we speak about digital government, e-government, that is really an interconnection and really just breaking away those silos that we currently have right now. Thank you.
So currently the National Identities Act is prohibiting government from sharing the population register, meaning that no entity can share government's data, what it has. That legislation, piece of legislation, is actually being amended currently so that there is actually some type of data sharing being facilitated. Even within government, if they want to share data, all of the entities with each other, they have to sort of set up at the moment MOUs. Like for instance, if BIPA wants to share some data in they have to set up an MOU with OPM, who's at the moment the custodian of the data, with Home Affairs being the owner of the population register. However, so that will actually facilitate the ease of data. However, you were mentioning Estonia, Ukraine. So Namibia has based its data interoperability frameworks on the X-Road of Estonia. So that's what we have done, and that's the adaptations that's coming, and that was what I was referring to before, that is actually being perfected at the moment.
Wonderful. Any additional questions? Yes, lady at the back. Do you mind coming to the front? Thank you.
Hi everybody. Fascinating conversations. Thanks so much. Can I ask 2 questions? Okay, great. So this is, it's not so much a question as it is, can everybody hear me? Behind the speakers. Okay. There we go. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so it's very interesting that you guys started talking about the wallets and the interoperability and the movement of data and all of those things. So my question or my ask is maybe from the NTC perspective. We talk about data and then the movement of it and the sharing of it and all of that, but we don't talk about the fact that at some stage somebody generated that data. You used my data to do whatever it is that you need to do. And while you may not specifically be targeting me and saying, Vivek does this and does that and stuff like that, I still perform a labor to which you then benefit. So what is your opinion about data, when I say data brokerage, whereas I get compensated for my labor? So the opinion you guys have around that, and Joseph, I don't know, this is a discussion that the civil societies have a lot. So anyone is welcome to obviously raise their opinion on that. And my second question, this would be specifically to Java and MTC, is considering that what you're doing and what you're setting up, fantastic stuff, but what is your opinions about the blockchain and setting it up on that? Thank you.
Okay, first question on benefit sharing of personal data. Who would like to field that one? No, go ahead.
I think we should have a detailed conversation at the HTTPS about that. But there's been a lot of talk around data brokerage and how the ordinary person or the person who generates that data can benefit. But I think there's 2 approaches. There's the benefit from the perspective of monetary benefit, and then there's a benefit in terms of the actual, from a service perspective. If you look at it from that point of view, the data that you generate in some way informs the products and services, pricing points and all of that benefits the actual user. For example, I'll give you an example in terms of whether it's telecommunications, what's happening around the world. So you as a user making your phone calls or using data or doing whatever it is that you're doing, at the end of the day,
as well. And to be honest, I believe, and we have some senior people here from our tech team and they'll be able to correct me at some point, but I believe a lot of the data that we process today and we generate, and it's true, a lot of it comes from labor of the users or somehow the experience that they have. We are using predominantly to improve the experience and to understand what are the real needs, because one of the issues that you mentioned at the beginning is that you don't want to throw tech at the problems, but you want to actually just ease the experiences that they already have informally, like the user voice that they might want to do with it. But from a perspective of blockchain, which was one of the things that someone just triggered into my mind last year, when we take the heavy load and the responsibility of saying, I believe I can somehow digitize a lot of the transaction or the ecosystem in the informal sector. The first thing is like, good luck. There's a lot of work. I want to know how you're going to digitize shops that they are not on Google Maps, and even City of Ubuntu doesn't have it registered. A lot of our shops, if you follow the map, you're going to go into the river. So there's definitely a lot of work in mapping the shops and trying to do a lot of the, because for you to use data and share data, you need to record it, it's true. But the conversations around blockchain, I believe in the future, I'm not aware of any of our interventions at the moment, is that as you are brave enough to get into such a complex sphere, a lot of the players, especially banks, they just want to see who is bold enough to do it first. There's so much work involved with like having all of this information like in a digital format, like who are they, what are their purchasing habits, what are they really buying. So we have today a lot of, so one of our products, because we predominantly speak about the informal traders, but we have different verticals in terms of the clients that we serve. So today we have even restaurants at the airport buying from Jabba, and you have a ton of service stations. So those are just different verticals. But one of the most interesting ones, and Alex works with them a lot, she's our head of partnerships, is the brands. The brands, they want to know what's happening. They want to know what's my market share in specific areas in Vindu. They want to know where are your trucks moving with our products. And that's a lot of data that at some point we can definitely use blockchain and work with. The banks also want to understand all these logistics partners that you're having inside your network. Are they not interested in expanding their fleet? Can we see some of their financials, like how much are they actually making out of Jabo, to see if we can have financing products? From the other hand, we also have the banks saying, how much of your products are the shops today not able to purchase because they don't have enough capital? And can we, for example, tap into their financials to understand if we can score them and see how risky they are for us to work with? So I think there's really like a lot of potential for blockchain at some point on how to protect the data, but how to go back to the initial users. And it's quite interesting to explore, right? Today, as I said, a lot of our work with the data that we have goes back to how do we optimize the business, especially when we're talking about small margins. And I believe there's a big opportunity for some of the partners and for the brands, because they use it a lot for R&D, for marketing, and for other users, and we have them already.
Okay, so I'm going to add another necessary evil for blockchain to the mix. So last year, and I don't know whether you might be referring to that, the University of Namibia had partnered with the Africa Blockchain Institute in Rwanda and is setting up that masters, but then there were also a lot of boot camps running to sort of train Namibians in the use of blockchain technologies. And one of the reasons why it was necessary is also that we signed, as a country, we signed an agreement with D-Climate, and UNAM signed that on behalf of the Ministry of Environment, and that is that you need blockchain technologies in green hydrogen. There are actually, Siemens had set up like a big sort of center, blockchain technology center in the UAE, and we're working very closely with Siemens, both Germany and South Africa, in pursuing similar paths. But why do you need blockchain for green hydrogen? Because you need to actually ensure, you need a verifiable record to trace all of your sources and everyone in the supply chain to ensure that your hydrogen is in fact green. And then once you can actually trace your sources and verify that, then what you also have is that you can actually claim the carbon credits for it. You might have heard that Namibia wants to also pursue that path, but blockchain technologies is actually needed for that, but we need to have skilled people in Namibia in it, and that's why we started on that path.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions? Oh, we've got 2, 3. Maybe 2 at the back. Sorry, did I miss someone's hand? With the lady with the blue, would you like to come up? Oh, yeah.
where it does. And the pushback from the legal fraternity was in this development compromises and threatens their own sectors' job security at the expense of just a few individuals getting rich, the people that then make the dollar. And I think we could take that situation and apply it to Namibia, where such a high unemployment rate, would we then say that the development such as that contributes to our development or does it not? So how do we then regulate the creation and the use of AI that is in the best interest of everybody, like the collective, instead of just the few on the top? So that's my first question. And then my second question, I'm going to direct it to Nawa. So, not to be controversial, but I just wanted to find out on what legal basis is NTC collecting biometric data, because the Communications Act does not specifically ask for it. And I think the stats from civil society right now, especially IPPR, because I've been reading, is that they feel that at worst, it's just plain unlawful. And at best, it's just an unethical exploitation of the loophole in the act. So I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you so much.
I'll come to you last now, because you have 4 minutes to answer. So, emerging technologies and the future of work. Anyone want to field that one? First question.
So one of the things is we always knew that the lawyers were going to be replaced, just like accountants are going to be replaced. There's a number of jobs where sometimes if there's a lot of data existing already, and if it is, and it's not the low-level jobs, it's sort of your middle-level jobs that will be sort of replaced. But I think that in Namibia, remember that I just said that we don't have specialized lawyers. I think that if you specialized lawyers is something that we will always have never, enough of. And second of all, I think that AI at the moment, and by the way, I just came from Paris where I spoke actually on the ethics and regulation of AI for governance around the world. And one of the things is that Africa never features, right? It's always based on, Europe is busy developing their AI regulation, and the US is actually following suit as well. And we in Africa, we're kind of like nobody knows what we're doing, etc. And I think that's it as well, because AI needs what? It needs training data. And we just said that we don't even generate enough. So there is not even enough for AI to understand. And this actually perpetuates and even makes the inequalities worse, because it stereotypes us in like the most excessive way. And one of the things that we can do to combat that is actually again skills, and this is why I'm hammering on that. And the second of all is that we actually have to generate our own data that we can build those training sets in. But we definitely need to regulate AI, and this is one of the things that we need to do it specific to the country. We can't be using, something that is imported from elsewhere and then think it's going to work here. So for me, that is sort of one of the fundamental things. The second thing is now, the direct answer to your question in Namibia is that when we were working on 4IR, on the task force, there was a lot of fears. No, you are going to replace who, and all of the farm workers, and and all of the jobs are. That's what people were having. And what we were saying is that with the Ministry of Labour, we said to the Ministry of Labour, what you need to do, it's contained in the recommendations, is you need to do a survey to look at what jobs are likely to be replaced by AI, right, in the future. And then what you have to do is some of them where you see that it's going to have a detrimental impact for Namibia, you have to ring fence them. Because I lived in the US in different states. One of the states that I lived in, for instance, is, the petrol guys, right? At the others, I go up, I put in my credit card, I do my own fuel for my car, and then I drive off, right? I don't interact with anybody. But one of the states that I lived in Oregon, because they said it is a displacement of so many jobs and they have a high unemployment rate, they actually decided, no, we're not going to do that. Our stations can do the same things as the other ones, but there has to be somebody serving you. And that's what we're talking about. You have to kind of like, we in Namibia have to take control of our own destiny and not let it just, sweep us up with the rest of the world. Thank you.
I'll try to answer as briefly as possible, because I think there has been a couple of press engagements around that. So I think first things first is that from a digital perspective, I think we have to understand that we now have digital identities, right? And looking at cases that we've encountered around fraud, identity theft and all of that, our solution Verify was one of the interventions that we have taken to sort of protect the customer, right? So the public view right now, obviously there's a lot of discourse that we still need, a lot of user engagement for people to understand why we're capturing biometrics. But I'll give a simple example. I use an iPhone. I'm sure some use Samsung or whatever it is, but my preferred means of accessing my phone is my biometrics, my fingerprint. And that is the most secure way. Why? Because if my phone gets stolen, no one can get into this phone. The case of biometrics is really to protect and to provide, how do I say, solutions, security solutions for you as the end user. And it's a difficult one because the question is around consent. The question is around, does a user understand what they're giving and what is going to be done with my data? So what we've tried to really shed light on was, number one, why are we collecting this data? From a perspective of KYC, compliancy, I'm sure you know the know your customer, know your client regulations that are out there within the banking space. There's also knowledge that us as MTC will be moving into the banking space as well, mobile financial services. So those are really interventions that we're bringing about to sort of comply to certain banking regulations and also just compliance-related regulations. To speak towards the consent part, what we've done as well with our clients is that we do give them the opportunity, we do educate them as well in terms of why are you giving this, why do we need this, and if you feel uncomfortable about it or you feel like, no, this I'm not comfortable, you are given the option not to proceed. However, the user also has the option in terms of accepting whether if their data is accessed or all of that. So there's a lot of conversations around that we need to unpack and further deliberate with the public. But we have issued a couple of press statements, and yeah, it's something that I wouldn't want to really touch too deep on right now, because obviously there's a lot of different entities and a lot of different stakeholders involved in that part. But yeah, we have issued our press statement, and there's a lot of information we've shared as well to the public on our online platforms, and yeah, I think we can sort of unpack that if there's any further details required around that. But it's mostly around trying to really bring about a security solution to protect users' identities and all of that, because there's a lot of fraud that has been happening within our stores. You are aware of the the scammers and all of that. So those are really interventions we're bringing about. And if you want to benchmark, you would see that from a SIM registration point of view, in South Africa, what they did is they just had the normal, okay, your national identity documentation and all of that. But those were interventions done over a decade ago, because we're a decade behind in terms of SIM registration, for example. But at this stage right now, if you benchmark with other markets, they have pivoted towards actually capturing biometrics, because that's a more safer and more secure solution that actually provides better benefits to the users. So that's the sort of thinking we have, and I think it's the best way to approach it. But yeah, further information, we have all the information online, we can unpack. If anyone has any questions around that regard, thank you.
of how one can demystify technology with a little bit of the older generations. I don't know if 30 is old per se, but let's say the 40-year-old, the 50-year-old, the 60-year-old that's been working in a corporate company for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, where your management has now a digital transformation strategy and they're trying to get their employees to adopt technology. Of course, the confidence level of your average, I would say, Namibian is a little bit low. If I think of my parents, the digital literacy rates are super low. How can one demystify technology within corporate environments to get people a little bit more confident to adopt these new systems? Because I know that about 70% of digital transformation efforts actually fail globally. This is a question I'd love to learn a little bit more about, if you have any insights on that.
Thank you. I think it's also very interesting, and I think we deal with it at many levels. From not necessarily from so some of our main customers is also B2B, but they're completely different in terms of their nature. But the challenge is similar. But on the other hand, even with brands, it gets quite interesting. For example, although you know that there's a lot of benefits from you having access to like a live dashboard to track all your data in terms of sales in real time, but how do you actually also sell it to the brands? So today we have, from a digital transformation perspective, I wouldn't necessarily be able to give the exact guidelines on how can we convert like someone that is not digitally savvy into using or to immersing themselves into technology. But one example that we have dealing with our customers today, because we know most of our outlets they don't really have access to internet, or they don't have smartphones, and the ones that do, the ones running those shops, and they're predominantly ladies, they're also not really comfortable placing an order. Although it's like pay on delivery, they still don't believe it to work. They don't believe it to arrive, they don't believe the order will get to someone, they don't believe that my phone needs an app from some other company. So in that regard, I believe it starts with a lot of education in both ways, but this is completely separate from a consumer perspective or with the customers that we deal with, because this is definitely one of the challenges. So there's a lot of education that goes on, and most importantly, trying to understand from the perspective of what we are actually selling, how do we remove entry barriers as much as possible? Super important. For example, I'll give an example from a brand's perspective, and I'll give an example from one, let's say, Meme that is sitting somewhere on BD that is selling products, and she prefers to get a taxi and spend 5 hours every day to look for products than taking a phone and even placing a call. I think number one is giving various options to build trust, because it's all about trust and maybe the impact that the solution can have, despite being extremely valuable. Sometimes as the ones providing the solution, we're 100% sure that this is actually something that will help you and something that will address a lot of the issues that you have. But at the end, everything, all the objections that the consumer will have are mainly related to fear or mistrust. So in order to get that trust is to really understand, come on, like we're building an app, and we have a market that a lot of people don't even have smartphones. The ones that have smartphones don't trust us. How can we make sure that first we start building trust? Okay, you can order with a field agent, you can order with a phone call, you can order with an SMS, you can order all these channels, and then from there somehow understanding there is a transition and transitioning them to a different product. Like stop pressing an order with, let's say, Josephat, I'm giving you this amount off if you place an order with the app, for example. Or I'm giving you this amount off if you download our app and you get a voucher and things like that. But this needs to be something that happens after a relationship has been built. At least that has been our experience heavily. And the way to build that relationship is to make it so easy for them to try you first, and then you start an education process, education. Now from the brand's perspective, it's not very different. There are products that maybe our tech team will spend thousands of hours and the company will invest like thousands of dollars, I believe, building them. And then you present to a brand that you know this is 100% everything that you need, and they're still like, everything is okay here. We are okay with how we have been doing things. And one of the ways is maybe if we know that the value of that specific product is $100 million. Can you try it for free for a month? And if you pay this 100, can we give all this kind of additional support just to really build the relationship and the trust? But this is really something that happens. It happens with digital transformation. It happens when we try to get partners or even convince like distributors to do things differently. Even the fact that we can digitalize it, they can outsource the entire supply chain. There's a lot of issues regarding, I don't know if it will work, but it's just they don't really trust you. Like, they don't really trust what you're offering. So a lot of the times is understanding what are the objections and how do I break them. If your problem is paying, I'll give it for free. If your problem is not paying but is on the results, I can give you case studies. So I think it goes around that, but it's really something strong everywhere.
Okay, I think our time is very limited. So Chantal, over the years in technology design and co-creation and then also deployment, I have a few pointers to share, but I'll share it offline because I'm worried about the time.
Thank you. Okay, last question. I think Anisha said there was a gentleman in red that had his hand up first. A few times, yeah. So I think, unfortunately, yeah, we're thinking.
Hi, thanks. Actually, a lot of my questions have been answered throughout the whole process. But then initially, I just wanted to touch, not really questions, but touch base on everything and seeing that the people that we've got involved on the panel will be able to answer a few questions, perhaps look into innovations and way to tackle these problems as well. I'd like to start with the e-commerce platform, which is basically what I specialize in. I understand that Jabo has found a way to navigate around the whole payment processes because, as you were saying, most of the consumers have a problem with trusting an online platform. When you've noticed with the recent report that I've seen as well, there's about 3.6 billion that was spent in wallet transactions, which are transactions that could have been spent on purchasing something online, for instance, and you'd have a cheaper rate in terms of paying for that. But then just the trust issue when it comes to that. So that's where society, perhaps societies like the internet societies would come in and try and educate people in the convenience and the effective way of running e-commerce platforms. Because at this point in time, what you get to see is that e-commerce platforms are mostly used as lead generators. So to say, you would find somebody that sees something on the online store and come in store and say, I'd like to purchase this, and rather do the transaction online and have the same product delivered to their home where they could have been seated at home and do that themselves. And from a policy and educational perspective, perhaps Prof would be able to elaborate or advise into this matter, where it's also an issue that the Prof has also mentioned that we tend to import a lot of these skills, but we have to look at the fact that intellectual property in terms of information technology in Namibia is not really considered as or is not valued as opposed to other professions. You get the engineering society where people can get board certified there, you get the law society where people can get board certified there, and then where you have a base salary, so to say, or a figure, which does encourage people to be in there and kind of protects them as well. With the ICT, we don't seem to have, or I'm not aware of anything in that regard, where we've got a board where one could be certified, and actually that guarantees a certain salary or package in that sense, because then you find that you get people that get paid as little as 3,500, or skills are imported from other countries simply because they don't trust local people to actually execute the specific tasks or duties, but the talent is actually here. But I would like to comment on the way that they've also navigated ways in how to monetize the whole e-commerce platform and not directly just working with online sales and try to create a whole environment in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, very important point. So, yeah, Anisha, I think I'll hand over to you to talk about accreditation in ITC sector.
Okay, so I want to say something about e-commerce. And I want us not to kid ourselves. We can look at fintech solutions within the country, your wallet systems, your whatever systems. But one of the big problems in this country is cross-border payments, international payments. And as long as we dance around that bush and we do not address it, it means that a lot of people in this country are not being enabled. There are many brilliant entrepreneurs who want to sell their stuff on the YouTubes, who want to sell their stuff on the Google Play Store, etc. They can't. They have to give it for free because they cannot get that money back out, because the one platform that is being used as an example everywhere is PayPal. And yet, in Namibia, if you're in Namibia, you can't do that, right? It's the tourism sector, it's the culture creative industry. If we do not get solutions to that, and this is something that on the 4IR, we called all of the players in because we heard it again and again and again and again, right? And we still don't solve it. Up to today, it's not solved. You know what people do? They travel to South Africa, open a bank account there, and they cash out their money there. That's what they do, and then they travel all the way back to Namibia. And we're not addressing this elephant in Namibia on that. Anyways, sorry. I needed to say that because it's something that we're always glossing over and pretending that everything is fine when we're not looking out for, where people are earning their keep as well. Okay, now I forgot what I was supposed to answer. That is a little bit of a difficult one because you have so many variations in the profession, right? You have the school leavers who do the online certificates, then you have the ones who do the formal degrees, then you have the ones, so there's like a lot of variety in that. Now, what some other countries have done is that they have opened up a section under the engineering society, right? And even under IEEE, we have like ACM chapters, but we try to open up an internet, an IEEE society, right? Chapter in Namibia specifically for computing. There were not enough people in Namibia who were essentially paying dues to IEEE to warrant a society, and we had to look at resorting under South Africa, etc. But even then, our numbers were just not enough. We needed something like 50, we didn't even pull 30. And people were just simply not willing to pay that because that is like a professional body, right? Then we had also the Alliance for ICT, and then we had the Internet Society, but we don't have a regulator basically for ICT. Now it has good news and bad news because ICT moves so fast that if you are going to start to regulate it, so in many countries they're opposed to the regulation, then it means you might stifle it. Because we see it now with engineering, there are specialist engineering professions that are coming up and Namibia is moving too slow, right? And so sometimes you then have people on the street because the engineering professional body is not catering for those new specialist engineering professions. But I think it's something that is worth exploring.
Well, everyone, you're all still sitting after almost 2 hours, so I'm going to take it that it was interesting. It certainly was for me. But yeah, this brings us to the end of our event tonight. I think just to summarize, I think one of the key outputs was just about education and skilling, and the mismatch in what is needed and what we have, and just finding creative ways to try and bridge that gap. And then of course the big issue of data, how we use it, and how we get it, and who has control over it. Really interesting things that has such an impact on economics, on politics, and on the social sphere as well. So I think a lot to think about, and I'd encourage you to continue this conversation even after we close, and as long as our panelists are around, please do feel free to engage with them. But really, I do thank you sincerely for being here tonight and being a wonderful audience. And I just wish you a wonderful weekend further. Thank you, everyone.